You are listening to the Next Play podcast, the playbook for high-performing leaders who want to exceed their full potential. From walking on the Ole Miss football team at 5'7", 150 pounds and earning a full D1 scholarship, to coaching thousands around the world and working with massive organizations like IBM. I've learned countless lessons that I'll be sharing right here with you. Join me as I interview some of the most successful people so you too can learn how to focus on always moving forward by deciding, planning, and executing on the next play relentlessly. This is Richie Contartesi with the Next Play podcast, and today I have a very, very special guest for you. His name is Syed Zaidi, and what he's done over the course of his career, and more specifically, working with a company and doubling their size in the past 2 years is absolutely incredible. I mean, I can't wait to hear his story. You're going to hear about his skill set. I had the pleasure to work with him about a few months ago. So Syed is an engineer by training and education, and has used those skills and his experience to successfully build and exit a number of companies that span multiple industries. Syed is currently the CEO of System Pavers, a 29-year-old home remodeling company that has nearly doubled in size in the last 2 years. Yes, doubled. Prior to that, Syed was the CEO of one of the largest and fastest growing home security companies in the country. Syed believes in intentional growth, and that growth comes down to 3 P's: planning, people, and process. So Syed, thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you, Richie. Super excited to be here. I've been a big fan of yours. And I've certainly loved working with you over the past few months. So I couldn't be more excited to be here. And when I got the phone call and said you wanted me on the podcast, I jumped at the chance. So thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I'm like, this is like, there's certain shows where I'm like, I'm so excited to learn something. Like, I know I'm going to get a lot out of this. And so
Awesome.
I'm really excited just for the conversation. So let's just start easy, man. How did you get into business? You're an engineer, right?
For sure.
By training and education. Yep. And what we were talking about, some of your stories of how you analyze. Walk me through how you got started in business.
Yeah, for sure. So you're spot on. My training, I did my undergraduate degree in computer science /IT. Quite literally, my first job out of college was as an engineer for NASA. So out here in the Washington, D.C. area. Yeah. So my first job was for NASA. I was actually working for a contractor, but my client was NASA. And I worked on weather satellites. So helped kind of analyze the data and software coming out of weather satellites. And I did that for a number of years and kind of really focused on the engineering side of things and developed that side of the world for quite a bit. It was kind of the mid 90s into the late 90s. So the .com bubble was,
so you were like writing
blown.
Software. You were actually writing. Okay.
Yeah. So I'm writing software for 15 years, from like 1995, call it, to 2010, probably even into 2011. And I really loved it. Somewhere in the middle of that, back in, I think, 04 or 05, I went back to school and I did my MBA. And so I kind of started marrying my engineering and technology skills into business kind of as early as 05, 06. And then it took another kind of 7 or 8 years to make that transition. But to kind of answer very directly the question, engineers have a very special skill, I think, and you kind of learn that both in college or whatever training you happen to go through, and then certainly for the first several years of working. And that skill set is really looking at stuff at work that you have done or what other engineers have done, and being able to be super critical about that work, but not in a bad way, in a good way. So the kind of analogy is, if you were to grab any engineer right now, today, anywhere in the world, you were to grab an engineer and you would say, hey, Mr. Engineer or Miss Engineer, I want you to show me something you did 15 or 20 years ago and tell me about it. So that engineer would take a look at some work that they did 15 years ago, whether it was a bridge or whether it was software or a computer or anything else. And more than likely, after a few minutes, they would start telling you all the stuff they did wrong. Oh, you know what? Could have done this better. I could have done that better. Somebody else could have done this better. I wish I had learned this other thing back when I worked on this piece of software. I would have made it better. And in fact, other engineers are very comfortable giving feedback, and engineers take that feedback. In fact, it's a very normal part of the process. When you're writing code, you just don't write software and then upload it to whatever, a system, right? A space satellite or a website or whatever it is. Other engineers come and look at it and say, let me tell you all the stuff you did right. Let me tell you all the stuff you did wrong. And then you guys work together to fix it. And then you eventually put it out into production. So that practice of evaluation of your own work, constantly examining what work you've done in the past and being critical about it and applying and always trying to be better, is really the first inkling of what started to get me into business. And the reason I say that is because I started seeing this opportunity within the business world, whether it's almost any industry. And that's one of the super cool things I'm excited to talk about, is all the different industries I've been in, and how I've been able to take these skills and kind of build them in industries which on the surface have zero relation to each other. But I started kind of noticing that in the business world, that's not exactly how it works, right? In the business world, typically, there's not a lot of recurring self-evaluation of the business plan, of the product, of the process, of the people. You just kind of pick a direction and then you go. And then if something doesn't work, you kind of change direction and you try it again. And sometimes it turns into a whack-a-mole. So I started taking these kind of very specific engineering skills that I learned and slowly started applying them to the business world, like in 05, 06, 07, 08. And then built a really nice, solid business over the years, and then eventually exited that in 2014. And that's when I kind of made the full and final transition away from engineering into the full-blown business side of the world, and have taken and continued to develop those same skills.
So you had your own company. So
yeah,
got it. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So what type of company was it?
Yeah,
is that the double positive?
Yeah,
Okay.
The Double Positive Marketing Group. So me and two friends, we started that business back in 2004. It was November of 2004 to be exact. And we grew the business super fast. Like we were growing like a weed for the first 2 or 3 or 4 years. I mean, we weren't doubling in size every year. We were quadrupling. Sometimes we double month over month or quarter over quarter. And
Crazy.
we were just like we were on a like a spaceship. And then 2008 hit, when the credit crunch happened, and the business literally, I mean, we probably went from, gosh, I don't remember the exact numbers, call it something like 80 or 90 employees down to 13, maybe even less than 13. Yeah. Because as it turns out, the business that we started was a marketing company for mortgage companies. And so 100% of our business, 100% of our business was in the housing sector in 2008.
So how did you, so I just want to start there because I want to dissect how you did it then. And then we'll talk about how you did it now, right? Like, how did you, I mean, that's no thing, like in a short period of time, doubling revenue month over month. I mean, what were you doing then? Like, how did you, what did you do in order to do that?
That's a great question. I think the key thing is there's a couple kind of key points. And these are in no particular order. The first one is you got to have a product that's worth selling. Right? Yeah. It all starts with that. We'll talk about kind of the people, the process, and the planning in a second, but it really does all start with whatever product that you're selling and making sure that you're actually creating value. Like, it's going to be really hard to double the size or triple or 10x a business or 20x if you're selling vaporware, right? Or if you're selling, stuff on a dream and an imagination. So it has to be something that actually creates value for somebody or some business, and being very mindful about how that creates value, what the value props are, being able to articulate them really well. I think one of the greatest things I learned early on in my career was how to do pitches to venture capitalists, because you don't have 16 hours to explain something. You got 5 minutes and, a half a page, and either it attracts their attention or it doesn't. And so being able to take your product and make it really crisp, 2 sentences. What do I do? And what's the value that I create? What do I do? What's the value I create? You got to get that down to, I think, 10 or 15 seconds. And then once that value is tangible, you can tangibly define that value. Then in my mind, it really starts to get into the planning stage. And the planning is really understanding in that market that you're in, what drives growth in that market. So every market's different, right? And so that's where people typically get hung up on, is they dive into one specific industry and they learn all about the industry and what the value drivers are for that industry. And then it's really difficult to take that same set of value drivers and apply it to another industry. That's not the skill. The skill is, how do you figure out what the value drivers are, so that when you go to the next industry, you can just reapply the figuring out part.
But how do you do that?
Yeah. So that's where it comes down to, you got to really understand and know what the growth levers are. Is it marketing? If it's marketing, then what about marketing is the value driver? Is it being able to figure out who your exact customer population is and developing marketing strategies around that? Is it brand development? From a marketing standpoint, is it brand development? And that's really what's going to drive my growth. Is it a scalable workforce? Do I got to go figure out a way to hire 5,000 people or 400 people or whatever those big numbers are? So it's really thinking about and being mindful about what those growth drivers are. And the way you do that,
or just so it's like the difference between, okay, I'm going to build an outbound SDR, BDR team, or a DDD team, right? Which is kind of similar to this. Or am I going to create an inbound system with Facebook and Instagram and Google, for example, or YouTube? So it's deciding or am I going to build a brand and go that route? So basically that's, first off, is you got to figure out, what in this industry works.
That's right. I would even go so far as to change the word where works, right? I put a modifier in front of it and I call it may work. What in this industry may work? And then working through kind of literally stack ranking. Like, is it brand development? Is it hiring an outside sales team? Is it in-house sales team? Am I going to do an e-commerce platform? Am I going to do door-to-door sales? What am I doing? And why would I do each one of those? And what's the value for each one of those? Then in my mind, kind of the next step is, you got to be able to test your way through. You got to be able to test your way through that stuff. The way you test it is, you got to know what metrics you want to use for success, right? So in the example we were talking about, we said, all right, we're going to have an outbound BD team. Fantastic. How do you know that an outside BD team is going to work?
Yeah.
Right. Wow. Those 2 questions we just put on the table are 90% of the questions that I ask in any company. What do you do, and how do you know it's working? Like, my team at System Pavers is sick and tired of hearing me say that. Like, I'll walk into a meeting and we'll say, great, what we're doing is we're going to launch this new product. And I say, great, how do you know that's the new product to launch? And how do you know if it's successful? Like, those are, like, if you can articulate those 2 points, then it gets you really far. So what are you going to do, and how do you know that it's working?
How would, like, if I was in the meeting and I was pitching to you this, how would or you were doing that with your team, like, hey, I want to implement this, like, how do you go about doing that if it hasn't been done yet, if you haven't actually done it yet?
Yeah. So if you haven't actually done it yet, there's some level of testing and investment that needs to happen. But in order for you to do that testing and investment, you got to know what the return of that investment is going to look like, and how are you going to measure that return. So let's take kind of the example that we just threw on the table. Is, I'm going to go hire a BD team, right? So we say, great, that's what we're going to do. How do you know it's going to be successful? Well, we're going to have to be able to make X number of outbound phone calls. They're going to have to turn into X number of leads. You have to turn into this number of appointments, right? You got to go through the funnel, right? And then you got to figure out, like, what kind of cash on cash return do you need to make this particular project work? Then you can go spend money against it. right? And then that's part of that planning is, okay, now I'll go hire the 2 or 3 BD people. We'll get them, whatever, they're going to have to go buy leads because that's what we said the model was going to go do. And then you're constantly evaluating that decision against the metrics that you've defined. And if it works, then so once you know what the metrics are, once you know what the actual numbers are, right, what you plan to do and what you're actually doing, that's when you know where to double down. And that's really where all the magic happens, is you got to be able to stack rank what you're going to go do, figure out what the metrics are that you want to go chase down. And then once the investment starts, that's where all of the math and science of growing, in my opinion, comes in, is figuring out which pockets of growth are working and then doubling down on those. All right, then let's see if that continues to work. Great, let's double down on those. So I can bring it back to a specific example if you like. But in that first industry, that first company, that marketing company, Double Positive Marketing Group, that's exactly what we did. We invented a new way of lead generation at the time. So this was 2004. And back then, every lead you just bought, like it got emailed to you or somebody sent over a spreadsheet or somehow you got a lead.
There was no Zoom info and Apollo and these.
Yeah, it's like all these data leads, right? There were data leads everywhere. So we said, all right, data leads are tough because you got to call the person, right? Whether it's B2C or B2B, you got to figure out a way to get a hold of them. They might be interested, they might not be interested. And you just waste a lot of time even getting to an interested party. So let's create a product that does all the pre-qualification of an interested lead in advance. And we only sell high quality, pre-qualified, interested consumers, in this case, for mortgage refinance. And we won't even sell the data, we're going to sell a phone call. So we're going to 3-way connect that consumer to a mortgage broker, a bank, or whoever it is that was paying for it. So boom, we solve multiple problems. We're not wasting your time dialing for dollars as a mortgage broker. When you pick up the phone, you have an interested consumer who's ready to go and pre-qualified, right? Consumers aren't dealing with folks that are. So that's the value prop, right? That's the product that we were selling, is we were saving time. That's the product we were selling, was time. In a nutshell, it was time. And how do we know it was going to work? Well, that's where we started.
And the fact that nobody likes to just sit there and, do this.
Yeah, for sure. All day long.
But go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, no. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it's good.
So, and then the question is, well, how do you do that, right? How do you go find those people who are interested in refinancing their home? How do you get them on the phone? What script do you say to them? How do you know when to draw the line, when to transfer them? All of that stuff was exactly these iterations that I was talking about. And you just do it. And if it works, you double your spend and you try it again, and you just constantly adjusting and testing. I think at least for the way I like to do things in business, I literally treat my businesses as ongoing mini experiments all the time, and getting the business comfortable with ongoing mini experiments all the time is what creates some of the growth that we've been able to experience.
And when you say the business, you're talking about the people, like the people in it, just getting them comfortable with, hey, we're going to be testing and measuring consistently.
Yeah, testing, measuring. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Like failure is not bad. Failure is just another learning opportunity.
Got it. Have you ever been in a position where you couldn't get past, like you were testing things and nothing was working, and you were just like,
Yeah. So for sure. So I'd go back to Double Positive Marketing Group, and when the economy basically collapsed in 07, 08. Yeah. And we were a mortgage marketing company, and we tested.
That's like the worst, literally the worst.
For sure. I mean, there was nothing. We changed pricing, we changed the scripts, we changed the customers, we changed everything you could possibly think of, and nothing was working. I mean, it was like a cold, dead winter. Right? It was just brutal. And so that's when what is commonly referred to as the pivot comes in. Right? You probably heard this. A bunch of businesses who are kind of growing and scaling, and when they hit a brick wall, they kind of rethink their business and pivot. So in that particular case, we were pounding the road trying to figure out, like we felt like we had a really high value, highly developed product with a great value proposition. It just didn't work anymore for mortgage brokers, but it had to work for somebody else. Like
for sure. Who else could like real estate? For? Well, like, I mean, any type of like B2C, right?
For sure, for sure. So that's exactly right. So we said, okay, we believe in the product. We know the product works. The application of the product in this particular case seems to have fallen apart. Let's figure out what are the other applications of products that the other applications that we could use for this product. And so as a result of that planning and as a result of that thoughtful process, we transitioned the business into education. So, University of Phoenix, Strayer, DeVry, those kinds of companies. And insurance, right? Auto insurance, life insurance, home insurance. And so so think about a recession, right? When a recession kicks in, people stop working for obvious reasons, but they redirect to education, right? Education always goes up in a recession. It's in many ways kind of counter-cyclical. So that's exactly what we did. We went all in on education at first. We hired a bunch of folks, invested the time and money, and the business within probably 8 or 9 months was right back on track. We still had to regrow it. But by the time we were done, I'd probably say the business was 4 times bigger, maybe 5 times bigger. And we expanded our markets. And so the key again is the product, test your way through it. And that will help you when, you hit a brick wall like we did with the recession. We just redirected our product to another industry that worked.
So now, as far as the product goes, I'm just curious. Did you actually write it, or like, because that's not like a white label. Like you had to have, like, you had the idea and then you actually wrote the program to make the product work?
For sure. I was the guy who wrote, like, when I say there's 3 of us that started the business. One guy, he was kind of the CEO, the strategy guy. The other guy was sales, 100% sales all day, every day. And I was everything that wasn't that, right? So all the operations, all the software, so I literally wrote all the code and all the software from the ground up. And then kind of transitioned into more of the business side over the years.
Yeah. So walk me through that. How did you go from, obviously engineer, writing code, obviously what you built with your first company, did you sell it, and what was the transition for you?
Yeah. So we started the company in 2004 and we sold it in 2014. I think it was December of 2014 or January 2015, approximately. And the business is still around, still doing great. A lot of the friends and a lot of the folks who were running the business back then, continue to evolve and grow with the business, and some of them are still managing and running the business now. So personally, it's super exciting to kind of build and run something and then ultimately sell it and have it continue to flourish even after that. So that was super cool.
I popped on the website. It's like still going. Yeah.
It's super cool. In kind of that transition from the tech side that I was talking about and double positive to the business side, it was really exactly what I talked about. Like, I started thinking about the sales team and what they said, and the customer service team and how they work with customers, and just implemented that same kind of test and learn process across the entire board. So, I went out on sales calls. I probably, I couldn't tell you how many, literally thousands of sales calls. I'd jump on a plane and I would go see everybody. I mean, there was times when I was on sales calls where I would travel, 4 weeks out of the month. I was traveling. And so that was really the beginning of learning the business side of things, what creates value in the mind of a customer, how to determine what creates value in the mind of a customer, because every customer thinks differently, right? And so you have to be able to adjust your value prop, and then using that same process to go through that testing cycle. Let me try a sales pitch that's this way. Okay, that didn't work. Let me try it this way. Okay, that worked. Now let me take that sales pitch and expand on why it worked and just double down on that part of the presentation. All right, so now sales conversion rates are going up. Great. Let's go grab the rest of the sales team and tell them to start using this. And then that's kind of how we even did kind of test and learn even within the sales process.
You feel like that's like a lot of your engineer side is like constantly tracking every little metric, and then, not just because a lot of people will track, but then they don't make decisions based on it. So your thing is track and measure everything and then make decisions and pivot quickly based on what the numbers say.
Yeah, that's exactly right. One of the first things that I do when I walk into a business for the first time, like literally within the first couple of weeks, is I'll go through my Michael Jordan presentation. And I'm a huge Michael Jordan fan. I'm not.
What's that?
I'm not
What's your Michael Jordan presentation?
Yeah. I'm not a Bulls fan, but I'm a Jordan fan. And very specifically, obviously we all know Jordan. We all know his accomplishments and all the great stuff that he's done over the course of his career. There's a specific quote, and I won't remember the exact words, but Jordan literally talks about all the failures that he's had. And so this quote goes something like, I have lost, whatever it is, 25 or 30 playoff games. 15 times in my career, I've taken the game-winning shot and I've missed.
Yeah,
I've been to,
I know exactly what you're talking about.
You know that quote, right? And that last line of the quote, it basically says, and this is why I have,
succeeded,
6 or 7, it's succeeded, right? It's
Yeah.
because of all these reasons I've failed. This is why I've succeeded. And so that's the Michael Jordan presentation. I'll pull it up and I'll walk everybody through it. And I'll say if we don't fail, we have not pushed the edge of the envelope. And you guys got to get comfortable with failing. We got to be able to try it. And if we're succeeding, that's great. But that succeeding, we got to keep on pushing it into failure. Failure is not bad. Nobody's going to get fired from failing. You get fired from not learning from the failure, right? Those are two different things. And you don't necessarily get fired for the failure, whether it's an investment or a project or a direction. But the key is, did you learn from it? Were you able to adapt and make the next set of changes? And so that in a nutshell is the kind of the Michael Jordan presentation. It's this guy was awesome, but only because he tried and he failed first.
Right. So your thing is like the incremental little growth comes from, just kind of working on the little things, but which is important, little things. But what I'm referring to is like, there's this opportunity and it's going to take an investment and it's way outside anything we've done before, but I think it's going to work based on these metrics. Let's make the investment. Let's go all in on it. And then let's film study. Let's look at the metrics and
that's exactly right.
And then go from there. And that's a lot of people won't take those risks. And you're saying is like, this is what I'm prepping you because this is what we're about to do. And then you hit, and once you hit it, versus,
for sure, for sure. You actually came up. You actually are using the perfect analogy, right? Film study, game study, right? No coach in the world shows up at a game and says, "All right, what are we going to do?" Right?
Yeah, exactly.
They watch.
At least not the good ones.
At least not the good ones. Yeah, for sure. They watch tons of films, right? They create a plan. They figure out who their opponents are. They figure out what their strengths are, their weaknesses. They figure out how to adjust, right? They even figure out here's the first 13 plays that we're going to run. And if they don't work, we're going to switch and try these other sets. So they're doing exactly the same thing that we're talking about here, right? They're planning, they're preparing, they figure out what works well in the product, what doesn't work well. They come up with a game plan and then they test, right? They execute that game plan. And if it doesn't work, they pivot, right? So it's exactly the same. And
so you're going, so you've done this quite a few times. You go into companies, you freaking blast their revenue and exit. So walk me through your planning, because that was interesting. We kind of talked a little bit about before on this call, but so you go in, you do your Michael Jordan, you prep everybody and let them know, the old way of comfort and average is no longer the case.
Right.
I'm gonna push your potential. And so they start feeling that. Now walk me through your planning. Cause is that the next.
Yeah. Right before you plan, you got to figure out what's the number that you're trying to move, because not every business is necessarily focused on the same types of numbers, right? So you might have a business that is crushing it from a top line growth revenue perspective, but what gets dropped into EBITDA isn't very good, right? So they have super low EBITDA margins, and on a comparative basis, that may not be good because their competitors are crushing it. They're dropping more cash into their bank account, in which case eventually they'll lose because they won't have enough money to reinvest in the business, whether it's market, right? So before you get to the planning piece, you got to figure out what's the thing that you're gonna put on your wall and say, we made it. And in the case of System Pavers, it's top line growth for us, right? What matters to us is being able to grow that top number as fast as humanly possible. And then what I have to do is I got to think about what's holding back the organization now from a growth perspective. What's holding it back? And that just takes, a lot of deep analysis, a lot of thought, a lot of talking to people, getting their perspectives. And then that's kind of the conclusion from that is, all right, here's the one or two things that are going to be the big growth creators. If we can just solve this one problem or solve these two problems, we'll be able to double in size in 2 years.
So are you like meeting specifically with like the leadership team, or are you meeting with everybody depending on the size of the company? Like when you're trying to find the weak links, right?
Yeah.
In a system, systematically the weak links, but also the people, right? I'm assuming something along those lines where you're trying to figure out where are the one or two, whether it's operations, is it sales, is it marketing, is it this group of people, is this leadership team, is that, or are you going and meeting and trying to find that? Like what specifically are you kind of looking for?
Yeah, it's all of that. Usually in the first kind of learning stages of coming into new business, I don't generally make judgments on people, like this person is a good employee or bad, or good at their job or bad. And the reason I don't do that is because they might be a genius, for example, but just be a victim of whatever the organizational goals were before. And so I can't really look at a person and say they were underperforming, therefore they're bad. They might have been underperforming, but on a relative basis, it was amazing. But so if we can just get some stuff out of their way, then they'd be awesome. And I talk to everybody, so there isn't any. I don't believe in kind of siloed information. I think that at every part of the organization, from the person at the front desk to the CFO and everybody in between, salespeople, construction. When I was done here at System Pavers, I still do it now. I'll jump in a construction truck every couple of months, and I'll grab a project manager. And we'll go talk to customers for the day, right? I'll go work on jobs with them. We'll check out the quality of the work that we're putting in the ground. I'll talk to the customer and figure out what's working well for them and what's not working well. And so all of that is in service of this constant kind of learning and adjustment.
Got it. Okay. And so then walk me through from there. So you've talked to everybody, you've kind of figured out where you feel could be the potential roadblocks. What's the planning look like for you?
Yeah. So the planning is kind of, the planning is really where it starts to get a little bit tough to describe. Yeah. The engineer comes out. I go into what I call mad scientist mode. And so I'm a big fan of doing things differently. Like I'm sure there's a lot of good, smart ways to do things. And I like to find the way that nobody else has figured out. And the reason I like to do that is because A, it's fun for me personally. And B, if we can figure that piece of it out, then it'll be very difficult for my competition to replicate it quickly. Yeah.
Because they're not getting the same information. Now, are you doing this with like sales and marketing funnels and operations? Like what specifically are you doing this with? And then I'll let you share kind of your process, but I'm just curious. Are you like drawing out like, kind of like graphs and of like, here's how this funnel would work. And here's, if this person does this, we're going to do this. If this person does, like, what does that kind of look like?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm glad you used the word funnel, because that's exactly right. Like almost every team in a business can be broken down into a funnel. And I'm a big believer in the funnel strategy. What that means is if you got to be able to translate each department, each team, each group's value proposition into a funnel. And the way the funnel works is the more value you can create at the top of the funnel is obviously bigger, right? You create more value at the top of the funnel, more value comes through exponentially on the bottom of the funnel. So first thing we do is we figure out what the funnel looks like for the marketing team, for the sales team, for the technology team, for the finance team, right? Sales funnel, funnels aren't limited to just marketing and sales.
Right.
And then we say, okay, like what are the different components in the funnel? So we articulate what those look like. And then what we do is we don't worry about in this first phase, we don't worry about whatever's on the bottom of the funnel. That part comes later, right? So hypothetically, you take a marketing funnel, right? Let's just say this was a website lead generation funnel. And so therefore, the last thing is somebody fills out a name, address, phone number on your website, and you got a lead, right?
Right.
There's a lot of magic that you can do there to increase the conversion rate of those leads, right? But that's all the way at the bottom. So you're increasing the conversion rate of an already very small number, right? To me, the magic is you go to the top of the funnel and you figure out how do you impact those metrics? How do you keep more people on the website, for example, right? Bounce rates. So how do you keep more people on the website? And so the more people you can keep on the website, then magically more people will come through on the bottom. And you'll get the benefit of all the different levers that are in between. So I always focus on the top of the funnel first and generally try to exhaust that. And sometimes that takes a long time. Could take years. It could take years. So then I go into what I call mad scientist mode. And I will just I'll go into a room with just whiteboards everywhere, like the one behind me. And and this is the crazy part, I'll literally put headphones on and I'll jam music as loud as I can so that I don't actually
How do you think?
Yeah,
so you don't think.
So I don't think. That's the point, right?
Interesting. Okay.
Right. So I draw the funnel and I say, all right, here's what the funnel's going to look like. Here's what the funnel is. I just want to focus on this top part, and I'll jam music as loud as I can, specifically so I can't think. And the only thing I do is I focus on all the ideas that pop into my head and that I'm actively thinking about that will help drive that top part of the funnel. And I write them down. And I'll do that for hours and hours and hours until I have 400, 500 items that I think could just drive the top of the funnel. That's where the headphones come out. And then I go back and do the analysis and figure out which ones were good ideas, which ones are bad ideas. How do I stack rank them? Then once I narrow it down to like the top 20, top 25, then I start to put together the math behind it. All right, like here's how we know these are going to be successful. Here's the metrics that we got to go look at. And then you can take that, 20 or 25 and then put that in front of the management team and say, here's, we identify the growth issues here. We identify what the funnel looks like. We're going to go chase after the top of the funnel. Here are the 25 projects that could drive the top of the funnel. Let's talk about these 25. Do we do them? Do we not do them? Who's going to do them? How much money do we invest? What are we going to not do so we can do those instead? And so that's the constant process right there.
Got it. So where do you find yourself gravitating most? Like, do you find yourself gravitating more to operations or to finance or to marketing and sales? Or do you feel like because you have this system that you do it all in every area and you feel good about it? Or is there one where you're like, this is my jam, this is my sweet spot?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I thought when I first started kind of going down this route, I had assumed that my jam was always going to be on the technology side. So I was going to go from engineer to manager, and then manager to chief technology officer, kind of stay on the management, on the technology side of things. But as it turns out, I love it all. Like I love marketing, I love sales, I love tech, I love finance, and a lot of people who may have my background. Like I talked to a lot of my peers who were engineers who turned into the management side, who were engineers, or maybe even have become CEOs. And the theme I find is, there's always something that they don't like, that they don't want to work in, right? Like, I just don't want to, I don't like sales. I wish somebody else would just take care of sales. And we could automate sales or turn sales and make it all e-com if it was an in-person thing. Or same thing, like finance is boring. I can't stand finance. But I think that if you have a good system and a good process, then you can find all of in each team, in each department, you can find these really cool nuggets of gold and of value that other people haven't come across yet, even if it's a really well-run organization, because everybody is just laser focused on what they do, and they don't have necessarily opportunity to step back and walk into a room with no distractions and just think about what's next, what's the next play, what are we going to do after that, what are we going to do after that, what are we going to do after that.
Yeah, no, it's super powerful, man. And I think like your hook as a leader and somebody who comes in and does what you do is that you're not going out and buying courses or doing trainings, learning the same thing your competition's doing. You're creating your own system and your own funnels that you just can't go replicate. And so if you're, in a position where you're like, hey, I need to find this right person for this role and to help me, as a visionary, like integrate basically, or CEO, the company, like to have someone who's got that ability is super rare. So I want to jump into, real quick, and I know we're getting close on time, but I want to jump into the last two at what you do. You meet with your leadership team. You've created, we're working on the top of the funnel and it's going to take time. Walk me through kind of people and process from that point of how you take now these ideas, you get buy-in. Like I'm sure
that's right. That's where a lot of the people part comes in.
Yeah. So walk me through that. What does that kind of look like?
Yeah, for sure. So the advice that I give to a lot of folks, even folks on my own management team, I give them the same advice that I'm about to tell you, and I take my own advice, and that is, before you pull the trigger and you make any changes, you have to be able to show what I call visible progress. You have to be able to hit singles and doubles before you hit triples and home runs, right? It's just really tough to walk into anything, whether it's a new business or growing a business or starting one from scratch, right? In any scenario, it's just highly unlikely, if you just, the numbers wise, it's just highly unlikely if you're just slugging for home runs. I mean, like home run slugging percentages are a lot lower than at, on base percentages, right? And for a reason, right? It's just a bigger risk. So when it comes to the people part and the process, those two start to tie in together. I focus on getting buy-in and getting everybody excited, motivated, and engaged, right? Those are the three magic words: excited, motivated, and engaged. And then we line up the planning part. So we focus on singles and doubles first. Small wins to develop confidence that the plan was the right plan. And by the way, if something bad happens and it wasn't the right plan, we struck out on a single, not bottom of the ninth, when we needed a big home run to win the game, right?
Got it.
So we focus on singles and doubles as intentional, both in terms of making sure the plan was correct, making sure the process was correct, getting people excited, and getting more buy-in. And then just as importantly, there's a lot of momentum building, right? Just like in a lot of other businesses or even in sports, right? If you can build good, high quality, positive momentum, then good things come out of that.
Awesome, man. And so then people process, walk me through that. Like so now you're on singles, you're on doubles. Do you wait until you have a certain amount? Like, cause some people will, and I actually used to make this mistake a little bit, is like over systemize before you even see if it works. So do you have like, is that why you have process at the end, or is that no particular order, or is it what? Walk me through kind of the process side of it.
Yeah. So I would dial it back just to the same engineering kind of skills that I learned. So when you're writing software and you deploy software into the real world, there's a concept that's called failing fast or failing forward. So which is, if I put some software out that isn't the best quality, or there was a bug in the software that I didn't know about, I have one of two options. Either I can undo the whole thing, right? Go back to the way it used to be, fix it, and then try again, right? Or I can say, you know what, we're just going to leave it in place and we're going to fix it as we go, right? It's called failing forward. You're just going to find the next bug, make the adjustment, find the next bug, make the adjustment. And then pretty quickly you'll get, to a fully up and running system that is perfect and that everybody was able to contribute. So we sort of kind of use that same methodology here too. So when we launch, right now we're looking to launch a new product in a new market, and we're doing some planning. We figured out the product. We figured out what the value prop is. We got the people involved. We talk them. We walk them through the process. And the process is, in this particular case, the process was we wanted to test our way into it. So we kept some of the metrics that we use for an existing product, for the installation of that existing product. And we said, let's just throw it out there and see what happens. And if we're not making money on it right away, that's okay. That's failing forward. Let's start making those small adjustments and figure out. We lined up all the small adjustments that we want to make in advance, so that if it's not working, we know the next dial to turn. Once that was working, we already know the next dial to turn, the next dial to turn, the next dial to turn. And each of those are singles, right? Each dial that you turn is a small single. So the process is a function of what you're trying to do, whether it's a product or a service, and how big the market is, and how you want to chase it down. But I think the key these days is speed, and being able to get out quickly and make adjustments quickly.
Speed is king.
Yeah. What's that?
Speed is king.
Speed is king, man. Speed is always king.
Speed kills, man. That's what we learned in sports. So do you, when you implement a process, do you have like a sheet where you have like, we'll use marketing, for example, because it's easy to understand. So it's like, lead to lead communicated to lead booked to, lead did a follow-up, lead, so every one of those is not only a metric, but it also has a conversion rate, right? So when you're implementing these new programs or this new product, do you lay everything out like in a sheet where you could see every step of the way where the conversion is? And then that's where you're like, oh, there's the hole. Let's do a base hit right there. Is that kind of a summary of?
That's exactly right. So, I somewhere along the way, as I ran these businesses, I got stuck in PowerPoint presentation land. And so I don't use a big sheet.
You were doing them? You were doing?
Oh, no, I still do them now. Totally. I still do them now. Like the way I do it is I literally, here's the problem here that we need to go solve. Here's what's most important. Here's the most important set of numbers and metrics that'll help us understand if this problem is being solved. Here's the product, here's the people, here's the funnel. And I literally build a story. And then that's the story that I use, that I socialize across the organization. And in that PowerPoint presentation is, here are the numbers that we're responsible for. Here's who's doing what. Here are the timelines. Here's the follow-ups. We're just constantly adding on to that same PowerPoint presentation. It's just easier to use, and we can throw pictures in there and charts and all that fun stuff. So it's just easier.
Did you get that from somewhere, or is this something you've just developed for yourself over time?
I think that particular skill I kind of picked up over the years from various mentors that I had.
Because the best leaders are able to do that, man. They're just able to get in front of the group and get them motivated, man. Get them wound up, get them excited. For sure. And you do with everything you're saying, it's like, here's the numbers, here's who's responsible, here's the problem, here's how we're going to articulate it. And that's like super, and I was just curious if you had a specific method, or it's something you've just built with your experience over time.
Yeah, it's definitely a build with my experience over time type of thing. I probably learned it somewhere along the way, far back, that I can't remember, and messed it up. And so I'm a big
tested and measured it.
No, for sure. Like I'm a big believer in people. People. Everything comes down to people. Whether you're selling to people, or you have whether you have a team of engineers or anything. Like it all comes down to people. So I spend a lot of time reading books on people, reading books on body language, reading books on negotiations. Spend a lot of time talking to other friends and other folks and peers about people and what our strategies are. So I do a lot of intentional focus on the people side of things.
This is awesome. It's been really, really valuable. So in wrapping up here, Syed, what's your next play, man? Like what you're doing right now is absolutely insane.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
What's the next level for you?
Yeah, so it's super simple. For me personally, I want to build a multi-billion-dollar organization. And so I've been fortunate enough to work with some great leaders and some great businesses and build businesses that were in the hundreds of millions of dollars category. But kind of that elusive, billion-dollar plus is something that I just haven't gotten to that point yet. So that's my next play. I'm laser focused on turning System Pavers into a billion-dollar plus company. We have a fantastic product. We have an amazing team, and we are already the largest in the industry. So this is going to be a great kind of a great icing on the cake for everybody involved.
One thing for sure, and that's that you don't think small.
Yeah.
Not at all. So you've done the 9-figure enough. So you're ready to take it to the next step.
For sure. Absolutely.
Love it. Is there anything I didn't ask you that you wanted that came to mind or that you thought about that you want to share? Because I mean, if there is anything, I mean, this has been really valuable.
Yeah. I really appreciate it, Richie. The kind of last thing I'll say is I spend a lot of time talking to other CEOs. When I think about kind of all these stages, the planning, the process, the people, it's not done in a vacuum. I have friends that I pick up the phone and I say, here's my plan. What do you think? And, they'll give me their feedback, and I won't do that once or twice. I'll do that a lot. There's 20 times with 10 different folks. And we do it for each other, right? I'll have them call me and say, here's what I'm thinking. And so we get the benefit of shared experiences and shared knowledge, which I don't think would be undersold. But no, other than that, it's just comes down to just time. You got to put in the time.
It's super, super important. And I'm glad you hit on that, because it's like you spend all this time, even like writing on the wall and everything. And you don't, it's not, you don't always just take it to market. There's, you have friends that you call on and share and bounce ideas. And I think that's powerful. So listen, man, I really, really appreciate you sharing your story and sharing your process. And I know a lot of people got a lot out of this, including myself. So I know I went a little specific in certain areas, but that's because these are things that areas that I'm like, hey, I want to get better at. So awesome. I really appreciate you sharing your information and your experience. So thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks, Richie. It was great chatting with you. You're a rock star, and anything that I can do to help in the future, I'd be happy to.
Awesome. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Next Play podcast. If you liked the show, make sure to leave us a review. For more resources, visit relentlessuniversity.com or download the free Relentless University app. And if you're interested in having me speak at your next event, visit relentlessrichie.com. Until next time.